Everybody, welcome to this class on the magic behind indirect. Indirect is a function of Excel that really does something incredible. Most people don't know it, have never heard about it, or even heard about it, but realized that attempting to use it was quite a bit of a challenge. So today, I'll try to demystify what indirect is and how it can help you and your stuff and needs in Excel. Okay, so the magic behind the function called indirect. And so indirect is a function that requires a proper understanding of references. And references is something that a lot of people have a hard time fathoming because we come from the world of paper. And in the world of paper, well, life is a bit different. In a sense, you don't get to use certain computer powers. And what is one of these powers? Well, it's called referencing. So how does that work? Let me try to explain it to you. On a piece of paper, you only get to write something somewhere. If you had the intention of having another cell or another area that would automatically be populated based on what you wrote here, it couldn't be possible on paper. You would have to write it twice. What's incredible on computers is that you can write something somewhere, and in your other area, you can automatically have it full also. That's what we call the magic of references. Okay, this idea that you can connect one thing to another. So, what types of references can you have in Excel? That's an interesting question because a lot of people just know simple references. So, what is a simple reference? Well, you can refer to simply one cell, which is a bit of a boring type of reference, but we do end up using this all the time. So you can imagine this cell to be cell A2. But you can also refer to things like columns and rows and table ranges. All right, so and what does that look like? Well, you have to imagine that it is more than one cell, either vertically or horizontally, or in some cases, vertically and horizontally, meaning a range which could be a square or a rectangle, more generally a rectangle. And so this could be something like this. Let's say this is A2 and this is C4. This could be A2. All right, here, A2 to the colon means C4 to C4. So this is how you could see it. So you can make Excel ranges, references to ranges and to singular cells. So there's two options. You can also have types of references that some people might know here with dollar signs, like $A, $4, right? This is an absolute reference. You even get these weird mixed references. Maybe you've seen them before. They're very useful when you've got a table that needs to refer on top and to the left, and that your functions need to calculate on both sides. These are extremely useful functions. So $A4. But to talk about indirect, we have to talk about a certain type of reference, which we call named references. And so maybe this makes you wonder, what is a named reference, right? Is it something simple? Yes, it's pretty simple. You can take a cell, like this A2 cell, and you could call it tax. So imagine this. You've got a cell. Okay, it contains 13%. Because it's the tax, right? And it could be cell F2 or F4, whatever, right? F4, which is also a shortcut for the dollar signs, if you didn't know. But F4 could be the cell. But you can take this cell and you can go in the name box in Excel or in the name manager, and you could call it tax. So that it's not called, well, it's still called F4, but it has another name called tax. And so if you wanted to make a formula that would calculate your tax for an amount, you couldn't just multiply it. So let's say that you had an amount in C2. You could say C2 multiplied by the tax, which looks much better than C2 multiplied by F4, much more understandable. And so where this leads us is to understand that you can sometimes have things that are named. And when you name things, Well, you sometimes want to refer to different names, and indirect is your way to go. So imagine this for a second here. Now this is not the most logical example, but it's the simple one in my mind. So imagine that you had two columns, right? Two columns of information. Okay, the first column, it's just a column, so it doesn't get a separator. But anyway, you have two columns. One, this one here, is the costs, and this one here is the sales. And you named them as such. You go in Excel, you take the columns, you go in the name box, and you name them cells. Then you naturally, if you have cost and sales, you probably want to make a report out of all of it. You're not just going to simply, have them named for no reason. So you have a report that gives you the sum of the costs and the sales. But what you would like is you have this nice little cell here that has a drop-down menu in it. Right? So in this cell, you've got a drop-down menu. You use data validation, and the options for your drop-down menu are naturally costs and sales. And you like it that if you chose costs, your total would show up in here for the cost or either for the sale based on what you chose in your drop-down menu. Now that's an interesting scenario, but how would you make a formula that's able to do that? Well, you could write if statements, you could make there's a bunch of ways of achieving this goal, but one very elegant way is to use indirect, because what indirect does is it will check what's in a cell and see if it's possibly a reference and not just text. It will check what's in a cell and see if it's not just reference. So let's give us an example. If I write equals sum, oops, missed a bit, sum of costs, then it will give me the sum of the costs. Or if I would write equal sum of sales, then it would give me the sum of the sales. But what if I wrote, and let's say that this is cell here, let's say that this is cell B2, okay? If we wrote equals sum of cell B2, then as you can imagine, if you try it out, what it will do is it will give you an error or it will give you 0. Why? Because in cell B2 you have the word costs or the word sales, and you cannot sum words. These aren't references. To Excel, these are just text strings. So you need a function that's able to transform the word into a reference, and that function is indirect. It will transform text strings into references. So here, I could write this function and it would produce the results I need. You see, I will write the sum of the indirect of B2, close bracket, close bracket. And this formula here would automatically be able to read what's in this cell and give you the appropriate range for your total calculations. This is something you could do in other ways, but to me this is a very elegant technique, and using indirect empowers many cool things inside of Excel. I hope that this helps you understand the beauty behind indirect and how it can be used to create other formulas that can look at different things without having to write extremely long formulas. Indirect can save you enormous time and can also make you much faster and your files more efficient. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about indirect or anything about Excel, you can visit my website, jameswh.com, where I've got a ton of cool exercises and a lot of great material to help you out. Have a great afternoon, and I really hope you liked this little class on indirect.